All right, so we're going to take a look at this hand here. I'll give you guys my thoughts, see what's going on. Let's get straight into it here. So you guys know this is the first time I've ever seen this hand. I haven't watched it before I'm making this review, so I'm watching this with you guys live. I don't know what's going to happen, so let's get into it.
Linus gonna punish here, king queen suited, 7K.
You sit or stand there? You sit or
He's
stand?
the first one who said.
Thank you.
So the first thing I noticed is just a bunch of limping here, which is extremely weird. I don't know who Aaron Zhang is. I don't know who Anson EU is. Obviously, I know Patrick Antonius and Linus. But 10-6 offsuit limping under the gun. Don't ever do this, guys. Please do not ever limp 10-6 off under the gun. Do not ever raise it either. This is terrible. So far, I mean, obviously Linus's line is totally normal. He's going to raise to 7,000. He's got king queen suited. Aaron Zhang calling with 6-5 suited, totally fine. Patrick Antonius over calling with jack 8 off. Definitely would not recommend doing that in any game. But like, you know, in these games, there's a dynamic, right? These people want to play a lot of pots to then get re-invited into these big games where like there's sometimes some bigger whales and stuff like that. So whenever you see like these top guys like Patrick Antonius and this and that, like they're making like these wild kind of too loose pre-flop calls, like jack 8 offsuit, he has no business in this hand here. But whenever you see this, you got to keep in mind, these guys are trying to play a little bit more loose and a little bit more crazy just so that they can get re-invited into these games. So just keep that in mind. But obviously, Linus and Aaron Zhang, those hands are totally fine. Let's take a flop. Let's see what happens.
It's a fun game.
Yeah, it's a fun game, man. Check.
I think it favors short deck players. Big time.
So Linus checks back the flop here in position. I don't mind it. I think it's fine. This is my thinking in this hand. If Linus is thinking, if I bet this flop and I get called by one of these guys, and then the turn or the river is a queen or a king, let's say. I won't say the turn is a queen or a king. Just say like one of the turn or the river is a queen or a king. Am I comfortable betting 3 streets of value on a lot of different runouts, being 200 big blinds deep? That's the question I would ask myself here. So if he can see a queen here, yeah, let's say for example, doesn't matter if Zhang or Patrick called. Can he go 3 streets on like brick runouts? Does he feel comfortable going 3 streets on brick runouts? And the answer to that is questionable. I think it really depends on who you're playing against. If you're going to get called enough by worse hands, or if you're going to get put into a spot where maybe you get check raised on the river and you're in a terrible spot. So I'm indifferent between the flop check here. I'm totally fine with it. I'm also totally fine with the bet.
Finish checking back. The flush draw 2 over. It's hits top pair.
All notes matched.
Yeah.
$11.
Bet 11.
Linus looking to extract value from all the pair straight draw type hands. Of course, weaker top pairs.
So Linus bets 11K on the turn into a pot of 25,000, which is, it's a bit of a small bet. I would have personally bet bigger here on the turn, and I think this hand is valuable enough to go bigger on turns, to bet turn and river. And I think now that he turns a queen, this is a very easy 2-street betting spot. Now, what he might be thinking is, I'm going to bet 11,000 because it's a little bit less than half the pot, and I might induce a check raise. Now, if I'm Patrick, I am considering a check raise here, actually, because like Linus probably is mixing in some Jack 10 checkbacks. Let's be real, right? But I think the majority of players at this table probably wouldn't be. The majority of players would just take all their combinations of Jack 10 and probably just bet it. So Patrick Antonius, I think, could potentially check raise turn here and then bomb a river and put a lot of pressure on, that's, you know, definitely an option. But he decides to call, which is completely fine as well. I think there's nothing wrong with the call. So far, I think this hand is kind of standard. Nothing too crazy. The flop check, like I said, I'm a bit indifferent about it, so it's totally fine. Let's see what happens in the river.
Patrick does make the call here, 14%. Does not hit. Pairs the 9.
$30.
Bet 30,000.
Linus correctly deduces that this queen with the king kicker is worthy of a value bet. Expects Patrick Antonius, of course, to raise ace queen pre-flop. So we're going to cut that out of the range. Expects like to hear from the jack 10s earlier to sets. Really his main concern is 9x. But he probably feels that Patrick at some frequency would lead the river if he did hit trip 9s. For Patrick though, a bit confusing as why Linus isn't scared of the 9x right now.
Which one do you have? Ace king, ace queen, or king queen?
He's right on.
It's a good bet. 一会儿我们晚点开工。I don't know. I just want to see it.
King queen.
King queen.
So Patrick calls for 30,000 here. Let's talk about Linus's bet first of all. Linus's bet is totally fine. In terms of Patrick's call, I think this is quite bad. I think this is quite bad here. And I think with this hand, so we got to think about Linus goes bet turn, bet river after raising the limpers. For the most part, his bluffing range is going to look like ace 10, ace jack, king 10, king jack. Those are like the cleanest bluffs here. I think that's going to be the majority of his bluffing range when he goes bet turn, bet river. The problem is Patrick blocks 2 of those bluffs with the jack in his hand, right? So he's blocking some king jack, he's blocking some ace jack. But then there's another problem in this hand. When Linus bets into 2 players on the turn here, right? And Patrick makes the call with jack 8, fine, okay. On the river, after Patrick's made that turn call, jack 8 is about the worst hand he shows up with here, I would say. Very close to, okay? When he limp calls, he shouldn't have been in this hand in the first place, let's be real. But then he limp calls, and then he calls the turn, and he calls the river. So come river, Patrick's range should look like some queens, some 9s. The only 8s I think that should be in the range, or maybe an ace 8 suited that he limp called, or like an ace 4 suited. And then like 8, 9, I mean 8, 10, and 8 jack. So he's very close to the bottom of his range here. I don't like calling with a third pair hand here. I think he should much rather have a queen or a 9 here in this spot. So if Patrick is calling jack 8 here, this is one of his worst combos, right? The only other worst combos he could potentially have is like ace 4 suited, which again is like a completely questionable call on the turn. I don't even think he should be calling any turn with ace 4 suited in this spot. I think it would just be not a good play. So I'm going to even take that completely out of his range. I'll take that completely out of his range. And he's got ace 8 suited, so let's... That one, again, it's just such a questionable turn call. I don't even think, unless it's ace 8 of spades, right? So 8 jack and 8 10 are going to be the worst holdings, in my opinion, that Patrick should get to the river with. And I think both those hands should absolutely be a fold. When you have a queen, the good part is that you block your villain from having a queen, which is huge, right? So like you want to have a queen here or a 9 to check raise. But now let's talk about his hand as a check raise. He could potentially go all in here because the way this hand was played out, it's quite unlikely that Linus has that many 9s. He's going to have some 9s checking back the turn, sure. But are those 9s going to bet the flop, sorry. He's going to have some 9s that check back the flop, sure. But are those 9s going to be betting the turn? Queen 9 would. But like a hand like 10-9 or Jack 9, let's say, that he checked back the flop with, very unlikely. Is Linus ever going to be checking back a set on the flop with 3 players in position? Very unlikely as well. And then the Jack 10s, yeah, if he's mixing in some Jack 10 checkbacks, that's fine. But he's not going to have that much Jack 10 either. So Patrick can have a lot more 9s than Linus can. Patrick can still have Jack 10. Patrick can still have Queen 9. Patrick can still even have a hand like pocket 4s or pocket 8s here that he check call the turn with. It's possible, okay? So he's got a lot of value hands here. So this hand makes for a pretty damn good check raise on the river here. So he could potentially go all in here on this river with this hand combination. I think this will be totally fine. I feel pretty good about it, honestly. So yeah, that's my opinion on this hand. I think an all-in could have been made by Patrick Antonius, but if he's not going to go all in, I think it's a definite fold on the river. Linus played this hand totally fine. He got max value. Patrick should have folded pre-flop. The turn, I think the turn calls, he has to call a turn, especially to that size. It's definitely a turn call once he's there. The river, it's just a fold versus most players. And you can check raise at some frequency. That's all there is to it. I think calling is just simply bad. And yeah, that's basically it. Nice hand, Mr. Linus. And Patrick, a little bit too wide. But like I said, you have to play a little bit wide in this. There's that dynamic where you have to play a little bit wide in these games to get re-invited to the games. Maybe you make a couple of loose calls here and there just to show like, hey, listen, like I'm a fun player. I'm exciting. I'm entertaining. So please come back and watch. Please come back and invite me to these streams. So there's a dynamic there as well. Like all these hands that I'm going to be reviewing, you got to remember that. Like there's always going to be some sort of dynamic where if you play too tight, if you play too fit or fold, and like you're not doing anything a little bit out of the ordinary, you might not get re-invited to these games that sometimes have some bigger whales playing in them. So that's something to keep in mind as well. When you look at a hand like this, it's not that Patrick Antonius is a bad player. Obviously, he's a great player. I think this hand was just played badly. And that's my opinion. Others can disagree or agree. That's fine. But that's what it is.